Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to follow up on the capitulation idea that we talked about several weeks ago. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Again, we did just launch some tiers, so you can make sure to check that out if you haven't already. We will run that Black Friday sale through the end of the month. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the topic of this video, we discussed this idea of will Bitcoin capitulate a number of times over the last several months. In general, suspicion that June was in fact not the low for the cycle. We put out a video not too long ago talking about will Bitcoin capitulate, and the reason is because we were sort of just drawing the same comparisons to what was going on in 2022 to really what was going on in 2018. And now that it has broken out to the downside, I wanted to provide an updated video, right? I mean, it seems prudent to say, all right, well, we talked about this likely scenario a few weeks ago. We in fact have had a new low. Where is the price today, right? So again, if you're not familiar with this general idea, and we've talked about this many times, is that in these bear markets, you will often see these higher lows, and everyone always gets excited about these higher lows because we can say, well, technically speaking, they're putting in the assets holding up relatively well. A lot of times when people start saying that, it ends up going in the direction that you don't really want it to, because these higher lows can often not really mean what you think they're going to mean. I mean, one way to interpret it, as I'm sure many people have followed, is the idea of just all these like these bear flags. Sorry if I can actually draw it, but these bear flags that occur at various levels, right? So just because you're putting in a higher low for a while doesn't really necessarily mean anything, because they can often break out to the downside, and we've seen that happen once again. So one of the things that we talked about in that video, when we talked about will Bitcoin capitulate, we drew out the similarities, right, between what was going on in this bear market and what was going on in the prior bear market. Again, if you compare the bear markets, the green line is where we currently are, right? This is the current bear market that we're in, compared to 2018 and the orange line, and then 2014, the red line. And again, as we discussed in that video just a few weeks ago, the similarities involved the initial capitulation down to the June bottom, right? To the June bottom. And then putting in higher lows until the bottom fell out, right? Until the bottom fell out, and it fell out in mid-November. And again, I mean, it really is a very similar pattern, right? I mean, a local bottom in June, everyone thinks the bottom's in, put in higher lows for a while, and then we capitulate, and the capitulation started again mid-November. So again, these similarities are playing out quite well. Again, if you want to go back and watch this video, it might be worthwhile to do so, because we talked a bit more in depth about all the different similarities between 2018 and 2022, and why you should be cautious about calling June the bottom when a lot of these same patterns are playing out in a very similar fashion. Now that we've actually broken down below, I suppose we should talk about that a little bit. One thing we could say is that despite the fact that Bitcoin has broken to the downside, it hasn't seen, at least not yet, right? It hasn't seen the type of swift capitulation that we experienced back in 2018. I mean, we did hold for a few days here, and then we continued on down. So far, this cycle, at least up till this point, you can see that Bitcoin is putting up a bit more of a fight, right? It is putting up a bit more of a fight. But another thing I was looking at too is that if you sort of draw out, and again, this is dubious speculation at best, but if you draw out sort of these higher lows, and then you find where it crossed the 200-day, right? The sort of these higher lows, and then where that trend line ultimately crossed the 200-day SMA. If you were to draw a line through that, it actually marked the market cycle bottom, basically to the day. I mean, more or less, it marked the market cycle bottom. And so again, if you try to take this to the bank and cash it in, again, I guarantee you they will not accept it, right? They're going to laugh at you. They'll laugh you out of the bank. So don't try to do it. There's actually a really great chance that this is not going to play out in the exact same way. But considering that, we talked about the similarities, played out in the exact same way, might as well continue talking about it until proven otherwise. So if we were to follow this same pattern, what would that look like, right? What would that look like for the current market cycle? And what would the implications be for a potential future market cycle bottom? Of course, this would assume, sorry, I have a cold. This would assume that the bottom is not in, which again, I mean, you can always make the case for. And I mean, so far in 2022, obviously making the case for the bottom has not really served anyone that well. And that's why at the beginning of the year we said, look, don't spend too much of your mental energy trying to call a bottom in 2022. First of all, the actual bottom, most people aren't going to buy anyway, so you really shouldn't spend so much mental energy on it. But second of all, when you're in a bear market, you just give it a little bit more time and we tend to go lower, right? So that's the general idea. But again, if you were to follow a similar type of pattern here, and we could sort of extrapolate out perhaps the 200-day SMA if it were to sort of continue on down on its current trajectory, where might it cross this trend line? So if I just sort of just connect these lows and try to be somewhat conservative about it, you can see that it would cross somewhere late December. I mean, right around Christmas, honestly, right around December 25th, December 26th, December 27th, around the holidays is actually where it would cross. And so, I can't really say for sure, obviously, if it's going to play out in the exact same fashion, but I will say this, right? I will say this. This bear market has been going on for over a year now. And historically, bear markets for Bitcoin last about a year, okay? The one in 2014 lasted 14 months, and the one in 2018 lasted about 12 months. So in that context, you could argue that we're well within the window as to when bottoms typically occur in terms of time. We know from the 2013 the bear market that was really started in late 2013 and lasted until early 2015, it lasted for 14 months. So we do, of course, have to recognize that and the implications that this bear market could, in fact, last until sometime in 2023, right? If the 2014 bear can last till 2015, the 2022 bear could last until 2023. It's just, something we have to consider. But, there do continue to be, similarities here. And so I think it's worthwhile to follow until they deviate, right? Until they deviate. And again, you could make the case. You could try to make the case that they already are starting to deviate. You're not really seeing that sustained breakdown just yet. It doesn't mean we won't get it, right? I mean, like in the next week, we could see it break back to the downside, and this just be one of those pumps that gets everyone to YOLO back in because they're promised the moon once again. If you zoom in to 2018, just to give you an idea of what it was like, we actually had several pumps. I mean, this first pump was about 9% or so, okay? About a 9% pump. From this wick here to this move here, it was about a 14 to 15% pump. And then this move down here up to this was about a 27% pump. And none of them marked the bottom, right? None of them actually marked the bottom. We then had this pump right here. That was about 12 or 13%. And then finally, we got a bottom, right? And during that phase, we had a 9% move to the upside, a 14 to 15% move, a 27 to 28% move, and then a 12 to 13% move. And none of them actually marked the bottom, right? Even though you could have argued every single time, I'm sure every single time someone would have argued that the bottom was in fact in. And so right now, we briefly had this, 16% move to the upside, and we came back down and put in a new low as of 2 days ago. And now we're looking at another 7 to 8% move to the upside. So again, just because you get these moves back up to the upside doesn't necessarily mean that the bottom has to be in. I mean, history shows us this year that patience has often been rewarded, right? And again, one of the things we've talked about at length is that, and we've said this every step of the way, is that even once the bottom is reached, whenever that is, you're still likely going to spend a decent amount of time at rather suppressed prices. I've seen a lot of comments from people, even yesterday, when the price moved back up to 16.2K, and people were sort of upset that they missed what they might consider now to be the bottom, right? So now the new bottom is at 15.4K. And I saw some general sentiment. It's interesting because no matter how low we go, as long as Bitcoin pumps, a few percent the next day, everyone's going to constantly wonder, is the bottom in or not? And one of the things that I like to remind people is that if at any point you feel the conviction that the bottom is in, right, whether it's now, whether it's say 3 weeks from now at a potentially lower price, even if it's off the bottom by a few percent, like it doesn't really matter, right? Like anyone who were to buy right now at 16.7 is still getting a better deal than basically anyone who bought during the summer, right? And a lot of people thought the bottom was in back then. So so it's sort of like, someone complaining that they bought Bitcoin, here rather than here, or during the downtrend before the bottom was actually in, right? Like complaining that they bought it here as opposed to here or something. So just remember that bear market endings can play a ton of tricks on you, and you'll constantly be second guessing everything every step of the way. But I will say, if you look at all the historic bottoms for Bitcoin, one of the things you'll notice is that we're entering we're entering into sort of the seasonality of when they normally occur. The first one was in November, right? So November 2011. This one over here was in January of 2015, and then this one over here was in December of 2018. And right now we're in December of 2022. We're in November of 2022, but we're quickly approaching December 2022 in just about a week or so. So, I mean, again, you have November, January, December. Is it a coincidence? I mean, it certainly could be, but I think people really need to be paying attention over the next few months, because I think we'll likely look back at sort of this season in general and talk about it in the distant future as the typical bottoming season for Bitcoin. Getting the exact price on the exact day is obviously going to be a very hard thing to do, and we've talked about all the bottoming indicators before, and the levels that different indicators would have to get to before they would say that the bottom is in. It all depends on how greedy you want to be in terms of being patient, or just how risk averse. I mean, I still would argue that the overall macro scenario doesn't necessarily look that great. But I mean, even in that sense, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't see short-term moves back up to the upside. I mean, we've seen this all throughout 2022, right? Every step of the way. But again, I mean, I think it's interesting to look at the 200-day SMA and potentially look to see when it crosses this trend line. Not to say that it has to mark the bottom, but just to say that, hey, you know what? Last cycle it marked the bottom. And also last cycle, we also had that local bottom in June with the capitulation starting in mid-November. And we had the local bottom in June here with a new lower low coming in mid-November. It seems prudent to continue carrying out these comparisons to the 2018 bear market, especially, and the 2014 bear market, especially when they continue to have so many similarities. Thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, do you have the sale, the Black Friday sale on the Into the Cryptoverse Premium? Make sure you check it out. We do have tiers now, so you can subscribe, lock in a lower rate, and you have until the end of the month. Thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.